I never thought a single moment would change everything I believed about my family. For 23 years, I watched my older sister Rebecca tear our family apart. Or at least that's what I was taught to believe. Looking back now from my tiny apartment in Chicago, I can finally see the truth. She wasn't the destroyer. She was the only one brave enough to speak up, and it almost cost her everything. Growing up as the youngest of three children in our suburban Minneapolis home meant I learned early how to disappear. My brother Nathan was 24 when everything unraveled, just a year older than me, while Rebecca was 26. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My father worked in finance, my mother volunteered at the local church, and we had the kind of manicured lawn that won neighborhood awards. But inside those walls, we lived by different rules I didn't even know were wrong until Rebecca forced me to see them. I can still remember that vacation to Orlando when I was 15. The Florida heat was oppressive, making my jean shorts stick to my legs as we walked through the theme park. I was a size 2, barely eating enough as it was, always conscious of my father's critical gaze. When he casually slapped my thigh and told me I was getting heavy, I felt my cheeks burn with shame. The other families around us were laughing, taking photos, enjoying their vacations. Meanwhile, I was calculating how many meals I could skip without anyone noticing. Rebecca saw my face crumble. I caught her eye and silently begged her not to say anything. Please, I thought, just let it go. For a moment, she did. Then my father tugged at the hem of my shorts, his fingers rough against my skin, and said those words that still echo in my mind. Cover yourself up, you're drawing attention. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. He was the one drawing attention, making a scene about his 15-year-old daughter's perfectly normal summer clothes. That's when Rebecca exploded. What did you just say to her? Her voice cut through the happy chatter of other families. My mother immediately went into damage control mode, her hand on Rebecca's arm, her voice low and urgent. Not here, Rebecca. Please, not here. But Rebecca was done being silenced. She turned to our mother with fire in her eyes. You're really going to let him talk to your daughter like that? You're going to pretend this is normal? The rest of us turned on her like a pack of wolves. Even me, especially me. I screamed at her to stop making trouble, to stop ruining everything. Nathan put on that awful smirk he'd perfected, the one that said nothing bothered him, nothing could touch him. But I saw his hands shaking as he shoved them in his pockets. My father's face turned that particular shade of red that meant someone was going to pay later. And we all knew it would be Nathan, because somehow in our twisted family logic, Rebecca speaking up meant Nathan hadn't controlled her properly. That night in the hotel room, Rebecca didn't sleep in her own bed. She crawled in with Nathan and me, positioning herself between Nathan and the door. I pretended to sleep, but I heard her whisper to him that it would be okay, that she wouldn't let anything happen. Nathan just stared at the ceiling, that fake smile finally gone, replaced by something hollow and frightened. As the years went by, our family dynamics only got worse. Nathan transformed from the sweet boy who used to tuck Rebecca and me in when we fell asleep watching movies to someone I barely recognized. By the time he was 19, he was just another angry voice in our house. He'd learned that the only way to avoid being a target was to become a weapon himself. I watched him practice my father's expressions in the mirror when he thought no one was looking, perfecting that cold stare, that dismissive wave of the hand. Rebecca never changed, though. She remained defiant, protective, infuriatingly unwilling to just go along with things. My parents called her difficult, dramatic, unstable. They'd shake their heads sadly when talking to relatives, lamenting how they didn't know where they'd gone wrong with her. Meanwhile, I became their golden child by default. The quiet one, the easy one, the one who never caused problems because I'd learned that invisibility was my only armor. The night before Rebecca's SATs changed everything. I can still see her sitting at our kitchen table, calculus workbook open, hands trembling with anxiety. She'd worked so hard, staying up late every night, determined to get into a good college, to escape. The rest of us were eating dinner, the clink of forks on plates the only sound until Nathan started chewing with his mouth open, making these awful smacking sounds. Rebecca looked up, her eyes bloodshot from studying. Nathan, could you please chew with your mouth closed? I'm trying to concentrate. Her voice was tired, not even angry, just exhausted. But Nathan saw an opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, gave her that look that was pure malice, and said words that still make me sick to remember. You're going to fail tomorrow anyway. You'll be stuck here forever, just another failure who couldn't make it out. Rebecca stood up so fast her chair tipped over. Tears were streaming down her face as she ran to her room. My father's roar followed her up the stairs. Get back here! You don't walk away from this family! But she was already gone, and I sat there, texting her from under the table, telling her she'd ruined dinner again, asking why she always had to be so sensitive. God, I was such a fool. After that night, Rebecca became a ghost in our own home. She was always at her friend Emma's house or secretly out with people my parents didn't approve of. I told myself I didn't care. I had my own friends, my own life. But the truth was, without Rebecca there to absorb my father's anger, I became the new target. Every day brought fresh criticism. My grades weren't good enough. My room wasn't clean enough. I walked too loudly, laughed too much, existed too visibly. Nathan had become untouchable, not because my father respected him, but because they both recognized something dangerous in each other. They were like two predators circling, neither willing to show weakness, so that left me. And unlike Rebecca, I didn't fight back. I just got smaller and smaller, trying to disappear entirely. The day everything shattered started like any other. It was a Thursday in November, unseasonably warm for Minnesota. Nathan had left his wet gym clothes on top of my mother's fresh laundry, and my father discovered it. The explosion was immediate. He screamed at Nathan, his face inches from my brother's, spit flying with each word. Nathan just stood there, that dead look in his eyes, taking it. Then I heard my name. "Sarah, get in here!" The command made my stomach drop. I walked into the living room on shaking legs, knowing something bad was coming, but not knowing what. My father turned to me and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Pure hatred. "You useless little witch," he snarled. "Can't even keep your brother in line. What good are you?" Before I could process his words, before I could even think to move, he shoved me. Hard. I went flying over the coffee table, my hip catching the edge as I fell. The pain was immediate and sharp, but it was nothing compared to the shock. He'd never been physical with me before. That was always reserved for Nathan, and only when Rebecca wasn't there to intervene. I tried to stand, my legs shaking, tears streaming down my face. That's when he kicked me. His foot connected with the back of my knees, and I went down again, my chin hitting the floor hard enough to make me see stars. "Get out of my sight," he growled. "You disgust me." I crawled to the bathroom and locked the door with fumbling fingers. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Without thinking, I called Rebecca. She answered on the second ring, and just hearing her voice made me sob harder. "Sarah, what's wrong? Talk to me." I told her everything through hiccuping breaths. The shove, the kick, the words that hurt worse than the physical pain. She listened, her voice soft and calm, telling me to breathe, telling me it would be okay. I heard rustling on her end like she was moving quickly. "Stay in the bathroom," she said. "Don't unlock the door for anyone but me." 20 minutes later, I heard the front door open quietly, then footsteps, careful and deliberate. A soft knock on the bathroom door. "Sarah, it's me. Open up." I unlocked the door to find Rebecca standing there with her boyfriend, Marcus, all 6'4" of him, looking like he was ready for war. But Rebecca's eyes were gentle as they took in my tear-stained face, the bruise already forming on my chin. She held out her hand. "We're leaving, now." I shook my head, terrified of what would happen if I left. "He'll be so angry," I whispered. "He's already angry," she said simply, "and he's going to stay angry whether you're here or not. The only difference is whether you're here for him to hurt." Something in her words broke through my fear. I took her hand and let her lead me out of that house. Past my mother, who stood in the kitchen pretending she hadn't heard everything, past Nathan's closed bedroom door. Marcus carried my backpack while Rebecca kept her arm around me, and we drove away in Rebecca's beat-up Honda Civic to an apartment I didn't even know she had. The apartment was small but clean, nothing like the chaos I'd expected from someone my parents called unstable. There were books everywhere, plants on the windowsills, and a couch that looked infinitely more comfortable than anything in my parents' perfectly decorated house. Rebecca made me tea while I sat there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. "You've been living here?" I asked, looking around at this secret life she'd built. 6 months, she said, handing me the mug. "I've been saving up, working double shifts at the restaurant. I was going to tell you when I had enough saved to help you leave too." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. All those times I'd called her selfish, dramatic, a troublemaker. She'd been planning my escape while I was helping my parents paint her as the villain. That night, she made me tell her everything. Not just what had happened that day, but all the things I'd hidden, minimized, or blamed myself for. The way my father commented on everything I ate. The impossible standards that changed daily so I could never meet them. The way my mother would comfort me after my father's outbursts, telling me that if I just tried harder, he wouldn't get so upset. It was like poison leaving my body, All these secrets I'd held so tightly finally spilling out. Rebecca listened without judgment, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand when the words got stuck in my throat. When I finished, she said something that changed everything. None of it was your fault, not the abuse, not the way you responded to survive it. You were a child trying to make sense of an impossible situation. I wanted to go to that Halloween party the next night. It seems stupid now, worrying about missing a party when my whole life was falling apart. But I was 23 years old and I'd already missed so much trying to be the perfect daughter. Rebecca understood. She ordered McDonald's, we watched terrible reality TV, and for a few hours, I felt normal, safe. The illusion shattered the next morning when my phone exploded with messages from my mother. Come home right now. Your sister has done enough damage. Your father is beside himself. You're breaking my heart. Is this how you repay everything we've done for you? Each message was perfectly crafted to hit all my guilt buttons, and they worked. Despite everything, I felt that familiar pull to go back, to fix things, to be the good daughter again. Rebecca saw me staring at my phone. She didn't try to take it away or tell me what to do. She just asked, "What do you want, Sarah?" Not what they want. What do you want? I wanted to be free, but I was also terrified of what that freedom would cost. In the end, my mother's manipulation won. I agreed to come home, just to talk, just to work things out. Rebecca drove me there, her jaw tight with worry. "You don't have to do this," she said as we pulled up to the house. "I know," I lied, "but maybe it'll be different. Maybe he's calmed down." The moment I walked through the door, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. My father was waiting in the living room, and the look on his face was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Before I could speak, before I could even process what was happening, his hand connected with my face with such force that everything went black. I came to on the floor, my head pounding, the taste of blood in my mouth. My mother was standing over me, not helping, just watching with this strange, detached expression. "Get up," she said coldly. "Clean yourself up. You're getting blood on the carpet." That was my breaking point. As I struggled to my feet, fighting waves of dizziness and nausea, something fundamental shifted inside me. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't complicated people doing their best. They weren't strict parents who just wanted what was best for me. They were abusers, plain and simple. "I'm done," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back." My father laughed, this ugly, bitter sound. "You'll be back. You're too weak to make it on your own. You need us," but he was wrong. I didn't need them. I needed Rebecca, and she was waiting outside, probably sick with worry. The next few days blurred together in my memory. Rebecca helped me pack my things, guided me through the practical steps of separating my life from theirs. We went to the bank to make sure they couldn't access my accounts. We got a new phone plan. We found a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Each step felt both terrifying and liberating, like learning to walk again after being in a cast. Rebecca had thought of everything. She'd researched restraining orders, documented years of incidents, saved every nasty text and voicemail. She'd been building a case, not for any legal action, but just in case we needed proof of why we'd left. Her thoroughness amazed me. While I'd been in survival mode, she'd been strategizing our escape. "We need to be smart about this," she told me one night as we sat in her living room, laptops open, researching our options. "They're going to try everything to get you back. Love bombing, guilt trips, threats, maybe even getting other family members involved. We need to be prepared." She was right, of course. The next few weeks were a masterclass in manipulation tactics. First came the love bombing. My phone rang constantly with calls from both parents, their voicemails alternating between tearful apologies and promises to change. "Your father didn't mean it. He's been under so much stress at work. We love you so much. Please come home and we can work this out." If I hadn't had that vivid memory of my father's hand striking my face, I might have believed them. Then came the guilt trips. My mother sent long emails about how I was destroying the family, how my father's health was deteriorating from the stress of my abandonment. She included photos of happier times, carefully curated to show only the good moments. "Remember this vacation? Remember how happy we were? We can be that family again if you just come home." When that didn't work, they switched to threats. They'd cut off my health insurance. They'd make sure I never got a job in this town. They'd tell everyone what an ungrateful daughter I was. My father left voicemails that made my blood run cold, his voice low and menacing, promising consequences if I didn't return immediately. But the cruelest tactic was enlisting Nathan. His message came late one night, just 4 words that managed to encompass years of dysfunction. Don't abandon me, too. For a moment, I wavered. Nathan was a victim, too, shaped by the same abuse that had molded all of us. But I remembered all the times he'd chosen to perpetuate the cycle instead of breaking it. All the cruel words and actions he'd learned from our father. Rebecca found me crying over his message. She sat beside me, quiet for a moment, then said, "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He has to make his own choice, just like you did." It was harsh, but true. Nathan had the same opportunity to leave that I did. He just wasn't ready to take it. Meanwhile, my parents had started their campaign to control the narrative with extended family and friends. According to them, I'd been brainwashed by Rebecca, led astray by bad influences, possibly on drugs. They were heartbroken parents trying to save their daughter from making terrible life choices. The story they told was so convincing that even I sometimes wondered if I was overreacting. Our Aunt Patricia called me one day, her voice full of concern. "Your mother is worried sick about you, honey. She says Rebecca has filled your head with lies. Why don't you come stay with me for a while and we can sort this out?" I wanted to scream that they were the liars, that Rebecca was the only one who'd ever told me the truth. Instead, I thanked her politely and said I was fine where I was. That's when Rebecca suggested we go on the offensive. "We need to control our own narrative," she said. "The truth is our best weapon." We started small, reaching out to family members we thought might be sympathetic. Rebecca's godmother, Linda, who'd always seemed uncomfortable at family gatherings. Our cousin Marcus, who'd witnessed one of my father's outbursts years ago. The responses were mixed but illuminating. Linda wrote back immediately saying she'd suspected something was wrong for years but didn't know how to help. Marcus admitted he'd stopped coming to family events because he couldn't stand to watch how we were treated. Not everyone believed us, but enough did that cracks started forming in my parents' perfect family facade. Then Rebecca had an idea that terrified me. She'd been recording our father's outbursts for months on an old iPod hidden in her pocket. The audio was clear enough to be undeniable. My father screaming obscenities, threatening violence, the sound of objects being thrown. You could hear the fear in our voices as we tried to placate him. She wanted to make them public. People need to know, she argued. There are other families out there dealing with the same thing, thinking they're alone, thinking they're crazy. Maybe our story can help them. I understood her logic, but the thought of exposing our private pain to the world made me feel physically ill. What if people judged us? What if they said we were overreacting or seeking attention? It took me weeks to agree, and even then, I insisted on using pseudonyms. Rebecca wrote a blog post that laid out years of abuse in stark, unavoidable detail. She included transcripts of some of the recordings, though not the audio files themselves. She talked about the gaslighting, the way we were pitted against each other, the cycle of abuse and fake apologies that kept us trapped for so long. The post went viral overnight. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories. The comment that broke me came from a teenager who said our story gave them the courage to talk to their school counselor about their own abusive home. That's when I understood why Rebecca had pushed for this. It wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about breaking the silence that protects abusers and isolates their victims. Of course, my parents were furious. The calls and messages reached a fever pitch. Legal threats were thrown around, though they had no real grounds to sue us for telling the truth. Some family members who'd been on the fence swung firmly to my parents' side, accusing us of airing dirty laundry and trying to destroy the family's reputation. Others, though, reached out with stories of their own experiences with my father's temper or my mother's cold manipulations. The most surprising message came from my father's brother, Uncle Richard. He called Rebecca late one night, and she put him on speaker so I could hear. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to get involved. I should have protected you kids." His voice was heavy with regret. He went on to tell us about growing up with my father, about their own abusive father who'd shaped my dad into the man he became. It didn't excuse anything, but it added context to the generational trauma we were finally breaking free from. 3 months after I left home, Nathan reached out again. This time, his message was longer, more thoughtful. He told me he'd moved out, was staying with a friend while he figured things out. He'd started seeing a therapist. He wasn't ready to cut contact with our parents entirely, but he was beginning to see the dysfunction he'd been swimming in his whole life. He apologized for becoming part of the problem instead of part of the solution. He said he understood if I couldn't forgive him yet, but he hoped someday we could rebuild our relationship on healthier ground. I stared at that message for hours, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to welcome him with open arms, to have my brother back. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about self preservation, was wary. Rebecca advised caution. People can change, she said, but it takes time and consistent effort. Don't rush into anything. Set boundaries and see if he respects them. I wrote back eventually, keeping things cordial but distant. I told him I was glad he was getting help, that I hoped he found peace. I didn't offer to meet or reestablish regular contact. Maybe someday, but not yet. The work of healing couldn't be rushed just because someone else was finally ready to do it too. Meanwhile, life went on in ways both mundane and miraculous. I got a job at a local bookstore. Nothing glamorous, but it paid enough to contribute to rent and start building my own life. I made friends with my coworkers, people who knew nothing about my family drama and liked me for who I was, not who I was in relation to anyone else. I started taking community college classes in the evenings, something my parents had always discouraged because they said I wasn't smart enough for higher education. Therapy was hard, harder than I'd expected. My therapist, Dr. Chen, was gentle but uncompromising in her approach. She made me examine not just what had been done to me, but how I'd internalized those messages, how I'd participated in my own oppression and that of my siblings. It was painful to confront the ways I'd thrown Rebecca under the bus to protect myself, how I'd enabled the abuse by trying to be the perfect daughter. You were in survival mode, Dr. Chen reminded me repeatedly. A child in an abusive situation will do whatever they need to do to stay safe. The goal now is to recognize those patterns and choose differently going forward. Slowly, session by session, I began to untangle the web of dysfunction that had defined my life for so long. Rebecca was on her own healing journey. Despite her outward strength, she carried deep wounds from years of being the family scapegoat. She had trouble trusting people, always waiting for them to turn on her the way our family had. She threw herself into work and activism, channeling her pain into helping others. But sometimes I caught her staring into space with such sadness it took my breath away. We took care of each other in small ways. I'd make sure she ate when she got too caught up in work. She'd remind me to take my anxiety medication, to be gentle with myself on bad days. We created new traditions like Sunday morning farmers market trips and Wednesday night cooking experiments. Simple things that had nothing to do with our past and everything to do with the future we were building. 6 months after leaving home, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. I turned a corner and there she was, examining avocados like it was the most normal thing in the world. She looked older, more fragile than I remembered. For a split second, I considered turning around, pretending I hadn't seen her, but then she looked up and our eyes met. The emotions that crossed her face were complex. Surprise, hope, anger, sadness, all in the space of a heartbeat. "Sarah," she said softly, taking a step toward me. I held up my hand, stopping her. "Please don't," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. She stopped, her face crumpling. We stood there in the produce section, two women who shared DNA and nothing else, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, she spoke. "Your father misses you. We both do. Come home, sweetheart. We can fix this." The pleading in her voice might have worked once, but I'd learned that some things couldn't be fixed, only escaped. "I'm building a good life," I told her, "a healthy life. I hope you can understand that someday." Then I walked away, leaving her standing there among the avocados. My hands shook as I abandoned my half-full cart and left the store, but I didn't look back. That night, Rebecca held me while I cried, grieving not the mother I had, but the mother I'd never had. The one who would have protected me, believed me, chosen me over maintaining the status quo. "It's okay to mourn what should have been," Rebecca murmured into my hair. "That's part of healing too." A year after leaving home, something shifted. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for as long as I could remember began to ease. I could hear a door slam without flinching. I could receive a text message without my heart racing, afraid of what fresh manipulation it might contain. I started to recognize myself in the mirror, not the scared girl I'd been or the perfect daughter I'd tried to be, but the person I was becoming. Rebecca noticed it too. "You laugh differently now," she told me one day. "Fuller, like you mean it, it was true. Joy didn't feel dangerous anymore." I could be happy without waiting for the other shoe to drop, without believing I had to earn every moment of peace through perfect behavior. I started dating a guy from my psychology class, a sweet, patient soul named David who never raised his voice and always asked before hugging me. When I finally told him about my family, he listened without judgment, held my hand and said simply, "I'm glad you got out." He didn't try to fix me or minimize what I'd been through. He just accepted me, baggage and all. Introducing him to Rebecca was nerve-wracking. She'd become fiercely protective of me, suspicious of anyone who might hurt me. But David won her over by bringing her favorite coffee and asking genuine questions about her work with domestic violence survivors. Watching them laugh together over dinner, I felt a new kind of family forming, one based on choice and mutual respect rather than obligation and fear. The holidays were hard that first year. Thanksgiving and Christmas had always been minefields in our house. Perfect opportunities for my father to create drama and my mother to guilt us about not being grateful enough. Rebecca and I decided to create our own traditions. We volunteered at a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving morning, then came home to cook whatever we felt like eating. No formal dinner, no assigned seats, no walking on eggshells, just two sisters choosing to spend time together. Christmas Eve, we decorated a tiny Charlie Brown tree we'd rescued from the discount lot and exchanged gifts that cost more in thought than money. Rebecca gave me a leather journal with my initials embossed on the cover. "For the next chapter of your story," she said. I gave her a playlist of all the songs that had gotten us through the worst times, plus new ones that captured who we were becoming. That night, as snow fell outside our drafty windows, we talked about the future. Rebecca wanted to go back to school, maybe become a social worker. I was thinking about changing my major to psychology, inspired by how therapy had changed my life. We made plans that had nothing to do with escaping or surviving, everything to do with thriving. Of course, healing isn't linear. There were setbacks, days when the old programming kicked in and I found myself apologizing for existing, taking up space, having needs. Days when Rebecca's anger at our parents consumed her, when she couldn't eat or sleep for the fury burning in her chest. We learned to recognize these moments as trauma responses, not character flaws. I had a particularly bad episode after running into a high school friend who asked innocently about my family. "How are your parents? I haven't seen them at church lately." The question sent me spiraling, convinced that everyone knew I was a terrible daughter who'd abandoned her family. Rebecca found me hyperventilating in a bookstore bathroom, unable to catch my breath. She sat on the dirty floor with me, coaching me through breathing exercises we'd both learned in therapy. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Again. You're safe, you're here, you're allowed to protect yourself. It took 20 minutes for the panic to pass, but it did pass. That was the gift of healing. Learning that the bad moments were temporary, that they didn't erase the progress we'd made. 2 years after leaving home, I got a letter from Nathan, an actual handwritten letter, not a text or email. His handwriting was neater than I remembered, the words carefully chosen. He wrote about his own therapy journey, the realizations he'd come to about how he'd perpetuated the cycle of abuse. He took full responsibility for his actions, no excuses or justifications. He didn't ask for forgiveness or push for a relationship. He just wanted me to know that he finally understood what Rebecca had been trying to protect us from all those years. He said he'd cut contact with our parents 6 months ago, after a final confrontation where he'd tried to get them to acknowledge the harm they'd caused. Their refusal to take any responsibility had been his breaking point. The letter ended with a simple offer. If I ever wanted to talk, he'd be there. If I didn't, he understood and wished me all the happiness he'd helped steal from my childhood. It was everything an apology should be, centered on my needs rather than his guilt. I cried reading it, mourning the relationship we might have had if things had been different. I showed the letter to Rebecca, who read it with a furrowed brow. "It seems genuine," she said finally, "but you don't owe him anything. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not out of obligation or guilt." I sat with the letter for weeks before deciding to write back. Not ready to meet, not ready to rebuild, but willing to acknowledge his growth and leave the door open for someday. That same year, Rebecca fell in love. Her girlfriend Maria was everything Rebecca deserved. Kind, patient, endlessly supportive of Rebecca's healing journey. Watching my sister learn to trust someone with her whole heart was beautiful and terrifying. She'd call me sometimes, panicked about letting Maria get too close. "What if I'm too damaged? What if I ruin this?" "You're not damaged, you're healing," I'd remind her, throwing her own words back at her. "And Maria knows your history. She's choosing you, all of you." It was surreal sometimes, being the one to comfort Rebecca when she'd been my rock for so long. But that's what real family does. We take turns being strong for each other. The wedding was small, just a handful of chosen family in Rebecca's favorite park. She wore a simple white dress and combat boots, because of course she did. Maria's family had embraced Rebecca completely, giving her the parental love she'd never had. Watching her dance with Maria's father, seeing the joy on her face, I thought my heart might burst with happiness for her. In my maid of honor speech, I talked about how Rebecca had saved my life, not just by helping me leave, but by showing me that speaking truth in an empire of lies was the bravest thing a person could do. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, including Rebecca's, though she'd deny it later. 3 years after leaving home, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology. It had taken longer than traditional students, working full-time while taking classes, but I'd done it. As I walked across that stage, I spotted Rebecca in the audience, cheering louder than anyone. Maria was there too, and David and Dr. Chen and my chosen family of friends who'd supported me through the hardest years of my life. My parents weren't there, of course. I'd stopped hoping they would change, stopped waiting for the apology that would never come. But their absence didn't diminish my achievement. If anything, it highlighted how far I'd come, building a life they said I'd never have, becoming a person they said I'd never be. After the ceremony, we went to my favorite restaurant to celebrate. Midway through dinner, Nathan walked in. I'd finally agreed to meet him a few months earlier, tentative coffee dates that were awkward but healing. He'd asked if he could come to graduation, and after much deliberation, I'd said yes. Watching him hug Rebecca for the first time in years, both of them crying, I knew I'd made the right choice. We're never going to be the close-knit family we might have been in a different life. The damage runs too deep, the lost years can't be recovered. But we're building something new, the three of us. Slow and careful and real. Nathan's in therapy, working through his own trauma, learning to be a person outside of our father's shadow. He's dating someone nice, has a steady job, volunteers at a youth center for at-risk kids. He's trying, and that matters. Sometimes I run into people from my old life who ask about my family with genuine curiosity or veiled judgment. I've learned to be selective about what I share. Some people get the surface story, others, the ones who've earned it, get more truth. But I no longer feel obligated to justify my choices to anyone. Protecting yourself from abuse isn't something that requires justification. I work as a counselor now at a domestic violence shelter, using my education and experience to help others escape what I escaped. Every day, I meet women who remind me of myself at different stages of the journey. The ones still making excuses, the ones taking their first tentative steps toward freedom, the ones learning to rebuild on the other side. I see Rebecca in the protective older siblings, Nathan in the kids who've learned that anger is safer than vulnerability. My supervisor says I have a gift for connecting with the most resistant clients, the ones who insist everything is fine, they're overreacting, their situation isn't that bad. I know how to gently challenge those defenses because I use them all myself. I know how to plant seeds of truth that might bloom later when they're ready. Sometimes that's all we can do, be the voice that says you deserve better until they're ready to believe it. Rebecca still works in advocacy too, running workshops on recognizing and escaping emotional abuse. We've talked about writing a book together someday, expanding on that viral blog post that started so many conversations. For now, though, we're focused on living our lives, ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. I still have bad days. Trauma leaves fingerprints that never fully fade. Sometimes I catch myself apologizing too much, making myself smaller in group settings, bracing for criticism that isn't coming. Old habits die hard, but I also have tools now, strategies for managing those moments without letting them manage me. I have a support system that catches me when I stumble. Last month, I got married. A small ceremony like Rebecca's, surrounded by chosen family and the few blood relatives who've shown themselves worthy of the title. As David and I exchanged vows, I thought about how impossible this moment would have seemed 5 years ago. Love without control, partnership without manipulation, commitment without losing myself. Things I didn't even know were possible when I was trapped in that house. Rebecca was my maid of honor, of course. Her speech was perfect, funny and touching without giving away more of my story than I was comfortable sharing with David's extended family. But she ended with something that made me cry. She looked right at me and said, "You were never the weak one. You were the one strong enough to let me protect you until you could protect yourself." That's its own kind of courage. The truth is, we saved each other. She by refusing to be silenced, me by finally listening to what she'd been trying to tell me all along. We broke a generational cycle that could have continued indefinitely, passed down like a cursed heirloom from parent to child. Our children, if we choose to have them, will grow up in homes where their voices matter, where their feelings are valid, where love isn't conditional on compliance. Sometimes I wonder about my parents, whether they've done any self-reflection. Whether they miss us or just miss controlling us. I hear updates occasionally through the family grapevine. They're older, more isolated, clinging to their narrative of being victims of ungrateful children. Maybe someday they'll see the truth, but I'm not holding my breath. My healing can't depend on their enlightenment. What I know for sure is this: leaving was the hardest and best thing I've ever done. It cost me the family I was born into, but gave me the chance to build a family of choice. It forced me to confront ugly truths, but allowed me to discover my own strength. It was an ending that became a beginning, a destruction that made space for creation. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, who's wondering if they're overreacting, if it's really that bad, if they should just try harder to make it work, let me be the voice Rebecca was for me. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be heard. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. Your feelings are valid, your pain is real, and your desire for something better isn't selfish or dramatic or wrong. It's the sanest response to an insane situation. And if you're not ready to leave yet, that's okay too. Survival is a process, not an event. Do what you need to do to stay safe. But know that there's a whole world waiting for you on the other side of that fear. People who will love you without hurting you. Life that's about more than just making it through another day. Rebecca and I have matching tattoos now, small birds on our wrists. Mine is taking flight, hers is perched, but alert, ready to defend. They remind us that freedom is a choice we make every day, that we're not defined by where we came from, but by where we're going. They remind us that even the smallest bird can soar if someone believes it deserves the sky. This morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own apartment, next to a man who loves me gently. I made coffee without worrying if it was too loud. I checked my phone without bracing for impact. I existed without apology. These simple freedoms still feel miraculous sometimes. Gifts I give myself daily by choosing to stay away from people who would steal them. Rebecca texted me a photo from her vacation with Maria, the two of them laughing on a beach somewhere warm. Nathan sent a funny meme that made me actually laugh out loud. David kissed my forehead and headed to work. My life is beautifully ordinary, unmarked by drama or chaos or the constant threat of emotional violence. It's everything my parents said I'd never have, everything they tried to convince me I didn't deserve. But here's the truth: they never wanted me to know. We all deserve peace. We all deserve love that heals rather than harms. We all deserve the chance to discover who we are outside of someone else's dysfunction. It's not selfish to protect your own well-being. It's not cruel to refuse to be someone's emotional punching bag. It's not wrong to choose yourself. The black sheep of the family wasn't the problem. She was the solution, the truth teller in a kingdom of lies, the protector in a home full of predators. She was the one who loved me enough to absorb years of abuse rather than let it all fall on me. She was the one brave enough to build an escape route and patient enough to wait until I was ready to take it. So here's to the black sheep, the scapegoats, the truth tellers, the ones who refuse to play along. You're not crazy, you're not dramatic, you're not the problem. You might just be the hero your family needs, even if they're too lost in their own dysfunction to see it. And if they never see it, if they go to their graves insisting you're the villain of their story, that's okay too. Your truth doesn't require their validation. My name is Sarah, and I'm a survivor of emotional abuse. My sister Rebecca saved my life by refusing to let our family's sickness kill my spirit. It took me 23 years to see the truth, but once I did, I never looked back. This is my story, messy and painful, and ultimately triumphant. And if it helps even one person recognize their own worth, their own right to freedom, then every moment of pain was worth it. Because that's what we do when we heal. We reach back for the ones still trapped, still believing the lies, still thinking they deserve the pain. We become the voice that says there's another way, the hand that helps them climb out of the darkness, the proof that survival is possible and life on the other side is worth fighting for. The journey isn't over. Healing is a lifetime commitment, a daily choice to do better, be better, love better than what we were taught. But every day gets a little easier, every year adds more distance between who we were and who we're becoming. And sometimes, on quiet mornings like this one, I can barely remember the girl who thought she deserved to be hurt, who believed love meant pain, who chose silence over safety. She feels like someone I used to know, someone I have compassion for but no desire to be again. In her place stands a woman who knows her worth, who sets boundaries without apology, who loves and is loved without fear. It's the life my sister saw for me long before I could see it for myself. And I'll spend the rest of my days being grateful she never gave up on showing me it was possible. To Rebecca, my protector, my truth teller, my sister. Thank you for being the black sheep. Thank you for refusing to be silenced. Thank you for saving me, even when I was too lost to know I needed saving. The world needs more people like you, brave enough to speak truth in the face of power, strong enough to protect the vulnerable, stubborn enough to never give up on the people they love. And to anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You deserve better. And if no one else has told you this today, let me be the first. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt. You are strong enough to survive this. And someday, when you're ready, you'll be brave enough to leave. When that day comes, there's a whole community of survivors waiting to welcome you home. Looking back now, I realize there were so many moments I haven't shared yet. Small incidents that seemed normal at the time but were actually threads in the tapestry of abuse. Like the way my mother would rearrange my room while I was at school, going through my private belongings, reading my journal, then acting hurt when I expressed any upset about the violation. "That's what mothers do," she'd say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "They care about their children. Don't you want a mother who cares?" Or the way my father would wake us up in the middle of the night for family meetings that were really just opportunities for him to air his grievances about how we'd failed him that day. We'd sit on the couch in our pajamas, exhausted and confused, while he paced back and forth listing our sins. Rebecca falling asleep during one of these sessions earned her a glass of cold water in the face. The rest of us learned to pinch ourselves to stay awake, tiny acts of self-harm to avoid larger ones. Food was another battlefield in our house. My mother cooked elaborate meals but watched every bite we took with hawk-like intensity. Too much food meant we were ungrateful gluttons. Too little meant we were rejecting her love. There was no winning. Rebecca developed anxiety around eating that took years of therapy to overcome. Nathan would shovel food mechanically, dissociating from the entire experience. I learned to eat exactly what seemed to please them, becoming an expert at reading their moods through their reactions to my consumption. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest part. We weren't allowed to have friends over because my parents said our house was our sanctuary, not a social club. But really, they didn't want witnesses. When classmates invited me to birthday parties or sleepovers, there was always a reason I couldn't go. My parents needed me at home. I hadn't earned the privilege. Other families couldn't be trusted to supervise properly. Eventually, people stopped asking. Rebecca fought against this isolation harder than Nathan or I did. She'd sneak out to see friends, forge permission slips for after-school activities, lie about where she was going. Each act of defiance came with consequences, but she kept doing it anyway. I see now that she was fighting to maintain connections to the outside world, to remember that not all families functioned like ours. Those friendships she protected so fiercely became her lifeline when she finally escaped. I remember the first Christmas after she moved out. My parents pretended she didn't exist, literally setting the table for 3 instead of 4. Her stocking was gone from the mantel, her ornaments removed from the tree. When extended family asked where she was, my mother would get this pained expression and change the subject. The message was clear: this is what happens when you leave. You get erased. That Christmas dinner was one of the worst experiences of my life. Without Rebecca there to deflect attention, every critical comment landed on Nathan or me. The turkey was dry. Somehow that was my fault for distracting my mother while she was cooking. Nathan's gift to our father wasn't expensive enough. Clear evidence of his lack of respect and gratitude. By the end of the night, I was in tears, and Nathan had that 1,000-yard stare that meant he was barely present in his own body. After dinner, I snuck away to text Rebecca from the bathroom. She responded immediately, like she'd been waiting. "You okay?" Those 2 words broke something in me. No, I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. That night was when I first started thinking seriously about leaving, though it would be months before I found the courage to actually do it. The financial control was another invisible chain. My parents insisted we hand over any money we earned from part-time jobs for the family fund, promising they were saving it for our futures. When Rebecca left, she discovered they'd spent every penny she'd contributed over the years. The bank account they'd promised existed was a fiction. She had to start from literally nothing, working double shifts and eating ramen for months to save up first month's rent and security deposit for her apartment. They did the same to me, of course. Every paycheck from my retail job went straight to them. When I protested once, mildly suggesting I should keep some for personal expenses, my father launched into a tirade about how ungrateful I was, how much they'd sacrificed for me, how I owed them everything. The guilt was suffocating. How could I be so selfish when they'd given me life, food, shelter? It didn't occur to me until much later that those were the bare minimum requirements of parenthood, not gifts I needed to spend my lifetime repaying. The medical neglect was subtle but real. When I developed severe anxiety in college, manifesting as panic attacks that left me unable to breathe, my mother told me I was being dramatic. Everyone gets nervous sometimes, she said, dismissing my very real mental health crisis. When the panic attacks got so bad I could barely leave my room, she accused me of trying to manipulate them into letting me drop out of school. It wasn't until Rebecca took me to a doctor herself that I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and started medication that changed my life. Nathan's anger issues went similarly untreated. My parents saw his rage as strength, a sign he was becoming a real man like our father. They never considered that a teenage boy punching holes in walls and breaking furniture might need help processing his emotions in healthier ways. By the time he finally got therapy in his late 20s, the patterns were so deeply entrenched it took years to unlearn them. The morning I decided to leave for good was unremarkable in every way except one. I woke up, looked at myself in the mirror, and didn't recognize the person staring back. She was thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She looked decades older than her 23 years, but it was the emptiness in her eyes that scared me most. There was nobody home behind that gaze, just a shell going through the motions of being alive. I thought about Rebecca, how she'd fought so hard to save that hollow-eyed girl in the mirror, and how I'd repaid her by choosing our abusers over her again and again. The shame of it was overwhelming, but shame can be a catalyst if you let it. That morning, it catalyzed me right out of that house and into the life I should have chosen years earlier. The practical aspects of leaving were harder than I'd anticipated. I had no money of my own, no credit history, no rental references. My entire legal existence was intertwined with my parents. They were on my bank accounts, my car registration, my health insurance. Extricating myself felt like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia, carefully cutting away each connection while trying not to bleed out in the process. Rebecca was endlessly patient as she walked me through each step. We spent hours at the DMV transferring my car to my name only. More hours at the bank setting up accounts they couldn't access. She lent me money I couldn't afford to pay back, found me job leads, even gave me professional clothes for interviews since most of my wardrobe consisted of the conservative, shapeless things my parents had deemed appropriate. The job search was humbling, my resume was thin, my confidence thinner. In interviews, I struggled to sell myself, to claim my accomplishments without immediately minimizing them. The voice in my head sounded suspiciously like my father's, reminding me I wasn't smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough for anything better than what I'd been given. It took dozens of rejections before I finally landed that bookstore job, and even then, I was convinced they'd made a mistake hiring me. But they hadn't made a mistake. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where people appreciated my contributions. My manager praised my attention to detail, my ability to recommend the perfect book to uncertain customers. My coworkers invited me to lunch, laughed at my jokes, treated me like I had value beyond my usefulness. It was disorienting at first, this casual kindness from people who expected nothing in return. The first time a customer yelled at me about a pricing error that wasn't my fault, I had a full panic attack in the stockroom. My manager found me there, hyperventilating into a paper bag, and instead of firing me for being dramatic like I expected, she sat with me until I calmed down. Then she banned that customer from the store. "Nobody talks to my employees like that," she said firmly. "You deserve respect, even when people are upset, especially then." I cried harder at her words than I had at the customer's abuse. The idea that I deserved basic human respect was still so foreign, so revolutionary. Every small kindness felt like a miracle. The coworker who brought me coffee on tough days, the regular customer who asked about my classes and actually listened to the answer, the neighbor in Rebecca's building who helped me carry groceries up the stairs. Each interaction was teaching me how normal people treated each other, with basic courtesy and consideration. Dating was terrifying. My parents had strictly controlled any romantic interactions during my teenage years, and their criticism of anyone I showed interest in was so harsh I'd learned to hide any attraction I felt. The idea of letting someone get close enough to hurt me the way my family had seemed impossibly risky. But loneliness has a way of outweighing fear eventually. My first few attempts at relationships were disasters. I was drawn to people who reminded me of my parents, controlling partners who criticized my choices and made me feel small. It was familiar, which I mistook for comfortable. Rebecca watched with concern as I repeated our family's patterns with new players, but she was careful not to push too hard. "You have to learn what you deserve at your own pace," she said. I'm here when you're ready to talk. It was Dr. Chen who helped me understand why I kept choosing people who hurt me. We accept the love we think we deserve, she explained. And right now, you still believe you deserve punishment. We worked for months on challenging those beliefs, on recognizing red flags I'd been taught to see as normal, on understanding that love shouldn't require me to make myself smaller. David was different from the beginning. We met in that psychology class I'd finally worked up the courage to take. He sat next to me on the first day, smiled warmly, and offered to share his textbook when he noticed I didn't have one yet. No judgment, no questions about why I was unprepared, just simple kindness. When I flinched at his gesture, expecting strings attached, he quietly placed the book between us and gave me space. Over the semester, we became study partners, then friends. He never pushed for more, never made me feel like I owed him anything for his friendship. When I finally told him about my family, expecting him to run, he listened with such compassion, I had to ask if he had his own trauma history. No, he said simply. I just had good parents who taught me that everyone deserves to be heard. Good parents. The concept was still foreign to me. When I met his family for the first time, I spent the entire dinner waiting for the other shoe to drop. Surely the warmth and laughter were performance, like my own family's public face. But as the hours passed and no one got criticized, belittled, or berated, I began to realize this was just how they were. They disagreed about things without it becoming a war. They teased each other without drawing blood. They showed affection freely, without conditions or manipulations attached. His mother hugged me goodbye at the end of that first dinner, and I stood there frozen, not sure how to respond to maternal affection that didn't come with a price tag. David told me later that his mom was worried she'd overstepped, made me uncomfortable. The idea that someone was worried about my comfort, my boundaries, was almost incomprehensible. I sent her a thank you card the next day, trying to express how much that simple hug had meant without revealing how starved I'd been for uncomplicated motherly affection. Recovery isn't just about the big revelations and dramatic escapes. It's also about the small, daily choices to do things differently. Learning to cook meals I actually enjoyed instead of what I thought I should eat. Decorating my space with colors and patterns that made me happy rather than what was deemed appropriate. Speaking up in class discussions without apologizing for having opinions. Each tiny act of self-assertion was a victory over years of programming. There were setbacks, of course. The day I accidentally broke a glass at Rebecca's apartment and found myself on my knees, frantically cleaning while sobbing apologies for my clumsiness. Rebecca had to physically pull me away from the broken pieces, remind me that accidents happen. That broken glass wasn't a moral failing. "We're not there anymore," she kept saying. "You're safe. It's just a glass." Or the time I got a B on an exam and spiraled into such self-hatred that David found me in the library at 2 a.m., surrounded by textbooks, trying to figure out how to fix my obvious stupidity. He didn't try to convince me a B was good enough, knowing I wasn't ready to hear that. Instead, he sat with me, helped me make a study plan for the next exam, reminded me that grades weren't a measure of my worth as a person. His patience was infinite, his support unconditional in a way I was still learning to trust. Nathan's journey ran parallel to mine, but at its own pace. After he reached out with that first letter, we began a careful correspondence. Email at first, then occasional texts. He was in intensive therapy, unpacking his own trauma and the ways he'd perpetuated it. His letters were raw, honest about the rage he still carried, the work he was doing to channel it constructively rather than destructively. He told me about the moment he realized he'd become our father. He'd been yelling at a coworker over a minor mistake when he caught sight of himself in a window. The red face, the bulging veins, the way the younger man cowered before him, it was like looking at our father 20 years ago. He walked out of work that day, called a therapist from his car, and began the hard work of changing patterns that had been carved into his bones. We met in person 6 months after that first letter, at a neutral coffee shop Rebecca had suggested. I barely recognized him. Gone was the angry young man with our father's mannerisms. In his place sat someone quieter, more thoughtful, with tired eyes that held accountability rather than blame. We talked for 3 hours about therapy, about healing, about the siblings we might have been in a different life. He apologized properly that day, not the manipulative non-apologies our parents had taught us, but real acknowledgement of harm caused. He listed specific incidents, owned his choices, didn't make excuses or ask for forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. He just wanted me to know he saw it all now, understood the role he'd played in our family's dysfunction, was committed to doing better even if I never wanted a relationship with him. I did want a relationship eventually. Not immediately, not easily, but slowly we built something new. Coffee meetings became lunch dates, awkward conversations became easier exchanges. He met David, who was cautiously optimistic about this new version of my brother. Rebecca took longer to warm up, her protective instincts still on high alert. But gradually, even she admitted he'd done the work, made real changes, become someone worth knowing. The three of us have dinner together now, once a month. We talk about our lives, our healing journeys, carefully avoiding the landmines of our shared past unless someone specifically wants to process something. We're building new memories to layer over the old ones, creating a chosen family that includes bonds of blood but isn't defined by them. Sometimes I wonder what our parents think, if they know their three children have found their way back to each other without them. Part of me hopes they do, that it haunts them to know we're thriving despite their predictions of failure. But a bigger part has learned to let go of needing them to see or acknowledge anything. Their opinions stopped mattering the day I chose my own life over their dysfunction. I still have nightmares sometimes. Less frequently now, but they come in waves, usually triggered by stress or anniversaries of particularly bad incidents. In the dreams, I'm back in that house, trying to leave but unable to find the door. Or I've never left at all, and my current life is the dream I'm about to wake up from. I wake gasping, heart racing, sometimes crying. David has learned to recognize the signs, knows how to ground me in the present without touching me before I'm ready to be touched. Rebecca has her own triggers. Raised voices in public make her go rigid, ready for battle that isn't coming. She can't watch movies with toxic family dynamics without getting physically ill. Mother's Day is particularly hard for her, surrounded by celebrations of maternal love while grieving the mother she needed but never had. We spend those days together now, creating our own traditions that honor the mothering we've given ourselves and each other. The work continues. Every day brings new opportunities to choose differently, to break cycles, to heal wounds I'm still discovering. Some days are harder than others. Some days the old voices are louder, the old patterns stronger. But I have tools now, skills I've learned and practiced until they've become second nature. I have people who see me stumbling and offer steady hands without judgment. I have a life worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth celebrating. To everyone who resonates with this story, who sees themselves in these words, who feels that mixture of recognition and hope and fear, you are not alone. Your journey might look different from mine. Your escape might take longer or happen faster. Your healing might follow other paths. But the destination is the same. A life where you get to define your own worth, where love doesn't come with conditions, where you can exist fully as yourself without apology or armor. The black sheep of the family saved us all, even if she couldn't save our parents from themselves. She showed us that truth was more important than peace, that real love protects rather than enables, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in sickness. She paid the price for years, carrying the weight of being labeled difficult, unstable, the problem child. But she never wavered, never stopped fighting for us, even when we fought against her. I see her clearly now, my sister, my protector, my guide to freedom. Not the villain our parents painted her as, but the hero she always was. And in learning to see her truly, I learned to see myself truly too. Not the weak one, not the baby who needed constant correction and control, but a survivor who found her strength when she needed it most. This is our story, mine and Rebecca's and Nathan's, but it's also bigger than us. It's the story of every family scapegoat who refused to play their assigned role, every truth teller who wouldn't be silenced, every survivor who chose freedom over familiar dysfunction. It's proof that the black sheep are often the ones who see most clearly, love most fiercely, and fight hardest for change. My name is Sarah, and I am no longer afraid. The girl who once made herself small enough to avoid notice has learned to take up space. The woman who once believed she deserved pain has discovered she was always worthy of kindness. The sister who once turned against her protector has become a protector herself. For others still trapped where I once was, this is what healing looks like. Messy and nonlinear, full of setbacks and breakthroughs, requiring more courage than I knew I possessed. But possible, always possible, even when it seems the darkness will never lift. Because there's always a Rebecca somewhere, refusing to give up. There's always a hand reaching back to pull you forward. There's always a door leading out, even if you can't see it yet. And when you finally walk through that door, when you choose yourself over sickness, truth over lies, freedom over the cage you've always known, there's a whole world waiting. A world where love doesn't hurt, where your voice matters, where you get to write your own story. It's the world the black sheep of families have been building for generations. One escape at a time, one truth at a time, one healing heart at a time. Welcome home.